No, Meghan is not invited to my upcoming Santa Barbara event. I have no involvement with the Epstein matter. Prince Andrew and Meghan do. She made an advance toward me. I did not respond.
It was supposed to be just another elegant charity evening on the California coast, but instead it became the night a sentence quietly dropped into the room and shattered the illusion around Meghan Markle and left Prince Harry blindsided by a truth he may never have seen coming. Because when Kevin Costner speaks, Hollywood listens. And this time, what he said didn't just echo through Santa Barbara, it traveled across the Atlantic, slipped through palace walls, and landed in the very heart of the royal institution. Suddenly, a story that had been whispered in private circles for years was no longer staying quiet. The evening itself looked perfect on camera. Soft lights across a private estate, expensive suits, evening gowns, cameras flashing. The 1805 live benefit in Santa Barbara, one of those quiet power gatherings where deals are never announced publicly, but careers are made, alliances are formed, and reputations are silently measured. This wasn't just a charity event. This was a room full of people who decide who belongs in Hollywood and who doesn't. And that's why what Kevin Costner said that night mattered so much. Because according to multiple insiders who were present, Costner made it very clear that Meghan Markle would not be invited to future private gatherings connected to the event held at his estate. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a sentence. Calm, direct, final. The kind of sentence that doesn't sound emotional, it sounds decided. And in Hollywood, when someone like Kevin Costner quietly draws a line, people notice. The room didn't erupt, no one argued, no confrontation, but the energy changed instantly. Conversation slowed, people looked at each other. Because in Hollywood, exclusion doesn't happen by accident, it happens by consensus. And suddenly, people started wondering what had happened behind the scenes that the public didn't know about yet. Because for years, Harry and Meghan had been trying to build something very specific in California. Not just a celebrity life, a power base, media deals, production companies, speaking engagements, influence. They weren't just attending events like this, they were trying to become permanent players inside that world. And events like the Santa Barbara benefit were exactly the kind of rooms they needed access to. Rooms where billion-dollar decisions are made over quiet conversations and private dinners. So when Costner quietly closed that door, it wasn't just about a party invitation. It was about access, influence, acceptance. And Harry was there that night, on stage, smiling, shaking hands, accepting applause. On camera, everything looked normal, but people inside the room noticed something else. Distance, not rudeness, not hostility, just distance. Short conversations, polite nods, controlled interactions, the kind of social coldness that only exists in very powerful circles where no one says what they really think, but everyone understands what's happening anyway. And that's when the whisper started. Because a few days after the event, a comment began circulating quietly at first through media circles and industry insiders. A comment allegedly made by Kevin Costner that connected Meghan Markle's name to something that made people in both Hollywood and London extremely uncomfortable: the shadow of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Now, no one was shouting accusations publicly, no official statements, but in elite circles, you don't need a press conference to create panic. You just need a name mentioned next to the wrong name. And suddenly, a social snub at a charity event didn't look like a social snub anymore. It looked like a warning. And that's when this story stopped being Hollywood gossip and started becoming a royal problem. Because the Epstein scandal had already done enormous damage to the British monarchy once before. Prince Andrew's association with Epstein didn't just create headlines, it created a crisis that took years to contain. Titles removed, public duties gone, reputation permanently damaged. Inside Buckingham Palace, that scandal was treated like a fire that had barely been put out. So when Meghan Markle's name started appearing anywhere near that same conversation, even as rumor, even as whisper, palace advisors reportedly began monitoring the situation immediately. Because the monarchy understands one thing better than anyone: reputation is survival. And once a narrative starts spreading internationally, it doesn't matter whether it's proven yet, the damage begins the moment people start talking. And the timing couldn't have been worse. The royal family was already in a fragile moment. King Charles dealing with health concerns, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepping back from public duties for recovery, fewer senior royals appearing in public. The institution already looked thinner, more exposed than usual. The last thing the palace needed was another scandal narrative, especially one connected to the same shadow that nearly broke public trust before. So behind palace walls, advisors started discussing something that had not been seriously discussed in years. Not rumors, not gossip, law. The Titles Deprivation Act of 1917, an old law, a very old law, created during World War I that allows the monarch, under specific specific circumstances to remove royal titles from individuals whose actions are considered damaging to the crown or the nation. For over a century, it mostly sat quietly in the background of British constitutional law, rarely mentioned, almost never used. But now, according to insiders, that law was being looked at again, not publicly, not officially, but seriously. And that's when this situation became something much bigger than a Hollywood fallout story, because now you had three worlds colliding at the same time. Hollywood, where powerful figures were quietly stepping back. The palace, where legal advisors were quietly reviewing old laws. And right in the middle of it all, Prince Harry. Because while all of this was happening, something else was changing, and people started noticing it. Harry began appearing more and more alone at the Invictus Games events, at charity appearances, during humanitarian trips. He was still doing the work that once made him one of the most members of the royal family, supporting veterans, visiting humanitarian projects, walking through minefields in Angola like his mother once did. And in those moments, he looked like the old Harry again. The prince people remembered, the soldier, the humanitarian, the royal who had purpose. But every time he appeared somewhere, the same question followed him. Where does he belong now? Because his life had become a bridge between two worlds, the royal institution he left behind and the Hollywood empire he tried to build. And now, according to insiders on both sides of the Atlantic, both of those worlds were starting to shift at the same time. Hollywood was becoming cautious, the palace was becoming nervous, and Harry was standing in the middle, watching both doors slowly start to move. So the real question isn't just what Kevin Costner said that night. The real question is this: did one quiet sentence at a charity event start a chain reaction that could change the future of the Sussex brand, shake Hollywood alliances, and force the royal family to consider decisions they never wanted to revisit? Because if that's true, then Santa Barbara wasn't just a charity event. It was the night everything started changing. And that's where the story takes an even darker turn. Because while the palace was quietly reviewing old laws and Hollywood was quietly creating distance, the real pressure started building in the place no one could see, inside the Sussex brand itself. Because brands don't collapse in public first. They collapse in boardrooms, in contracts, in phone calls that suddenly don't get returned. Behind closed doors in Los Angeles, executives and media strategists were no longer asking how big Harry and Meghan could become. They were asking a much colder question: had the Sussex name become a risk? In the entertainment industry, reputation isn't personal, it's financial. And every major deal, especially the kind of multi-million-dollar agreements the Sussexes signed, comes with something called a morality clause, a quiet legal line that allows companies to step back if a public figure becomes associated with controversy that could damage the company's image. It's not emotional, it's not personal, it's business. And when controversy starts appearing from multiple directions at once, Hollywood whispers, royal tension, legal discussions, companies start calculating. Because the California empire Harry and Meghan built was never just about fame. It was about positioning, Netflix deals, media production, public speaking, partnerships, influence. They weren't trying to be celebrities, they were trying to become a power brand that could sit somewhere between royalty and Hollywood. That was the strategy from the beginning. Royal status opened the door, Hollywood deals built the future. But that strategy only works if both sides still want you. And now, for the first time, insiders started whispering that both sides were becoming uncertain at the same time. In Britain, the conversation was becoming constitutional. In Hollywood, the conversation was becoming financial. And in the middle of all this, Harry's public appearances started telling a very different story than the headlines. Because while controversy surrounded Meghan, Harry's solo appearances began reminding people who he used to be before all of this. At the Invictus Games events, he wasn't a Hollywood producer or a media personality. He was the prince who founded something meaningful, the soldier who understood veterans, the man who could walk into a room full of wounded servicemen and women and speak their language without a script. Then came Angola, the landmine walk, and suddenly the world saw something powerful. Not Harry the celebrity, not Harry the Netflix producer, but Harry the son of Princess Diana, walking through a minefield the same way his mother once did. The images were striking, emotional, symbolic, and for a moment it reminded everyone of a version of Harry that existed long before Hollywood, long before California, long before the royal exit. And that's when a new question started spreading quietly among royal watchers, political observers, and even media executives. If everything falls apart, where does Harry go? Because legally, constitutionally, and personally, Harry's situation is unlike anyone else's. He is still a prince, still the son of a king, still connected to the royal bloodline, but he is also financially and professionally tied tied to an American media world that depends entirely on public image. If Hollywood becomes cold and the palace becomes cautious, Harry isn't just facing a PR crisis, he's facing an identity crisis. And insiders began noticing something else that felt very telling. The more the controversy grew, the more Harry seemed to appear alone at major public moments. Not always, not dramatically, just enough for people to notice. And in royal history, optics are never accidental. Appearances tell stories that statements never will. Some observers began quietly asking whether Harry was beginning to reposition himself, not publicly, not officially, but symbolically. More military events, more humanitarian visits, less Hollywood red carpet energy, less media production announcements. It was subtle, but in royal strategy, subtle changes often mean very big conversations are happening behind closed doors. Because if there is one thing the royal institution understands better than anything else, it is survival. The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, scandals, divorces, political crises, and public revolts for one reason. When a situation becomes a threat to the institution always chooses itself first. Always. And that's why the discussion around the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 was so significant. Not because it would definitely happen, but because the fact it was even being discussed meant the palace was thinking in worst-case scenarios. And worst-case scenarios mean one thing: contingency plans. Meanwhile, back in Hollywood, the shift was becoming more visible, but still very quiet. No big public statements, no dramatic contract cancellations, just fewer appearances, fewer public endorsements, fewer photos in the same rooms with the same powerful people. In Hollywood, exile doesn't look like exile, it looks like invitations that stop arriving. Because people in his position don't create international shockwaves by accident. They speak carefully, especially when royalty is involved, especially when Hollywood power networks are involved, and especially when a single sentence can travel from a private estate in Santa Barbara all the way into Buckingham Palace legal offices. So was this just a personal disagreement? A social misunderstanding? A Hollywood personality clash? Or was that one quiet sentence actually a signal that something much bigger was happening behind the scenes? Something the public still hasn't fully seen yet. Because if the doors in Hollywood are quietly closing and the palace is quietly reviewing old laws, then the real story may not be about a comment at a charity event at all. The real story may be about a prince standing at a crossroads, an institution protecting its future, and an empire in California that suddenly doesn't look as untouchable as it once did. And if that's true, then this story isn't ending. This story is just getting started.